So hello. Hi there. It's so good to be in Germany now. I've been doing so many calls in Spain and in South America the last week, so it's actually good to be back in Europe. Um, okay, so let me see. Let's do a shared screen. I hope everyone is well. Um, Here are the questions collected. So I'm trying this out. I was doing this in the last Zoom call and it actually worked really well to just sense where people are in the space, just to meet where everyone is at. So in no particular order, I copy pasted things into the screen, into my laptop. So we could, instead of me preparing for a lecture, we can see what are in your thoughts, your minds, your bodies. And we can construct a story out of this, more or less. See where the connections are at. I guess we could try to tackle these.
Hi.
Yes? Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
1 second. There's 2 more questions we have here.
Okay.
One,
Are you sending them?
the question is, yeah, I just sent it to you. One is about earthquake. Is it a Kundalini syndrome of the earth? Why does that? And is it possible to activate children with disabilities? Would be the
Okay. Okay, so let's approach these in general. How to work with children with disabilities. Earthquakes, are they manifestations of movements happening within us, maybe something like that? All right. Okay. So I found this one interesting in particular. As many of you might know or might not know, I experienced my initial inner dance process when I lived on an island eating nothing more than just coconuts and living in light, living in air. So I think in particular, we have to be clear. Just a minute. I'm going to open my iPad just so we can use that screen as well. I like to think through. Oh, okay. What limit? I don't know about a limit. I don't like limits. I know I like limits. Okay. Initially, we have to answer the question, where is it coming from? A lot of people ask, like, where's the energy coming from? So when I was living on the island alone, like on a coconut diet, through the instructions of the mother, for one, like I would say I was living in nature. I was living on light food or nutrition. And there is a question around nutrition in the list. I was alone. This is a really big part. Something happens when we are in solitude. But I would say the main thing is because I was in nature. There's something about nature. A lot of human beings, we don't know what it means to live with the earth. So a lot of people are asking, like, where is your energy coming from? Like, who was your teacher who performed initiation or Shaktipat on you? Like for me, the teacher was the earth. There was a lot of communication with the mother. And for me, I didn't see a difference between the earth and the mother. So I feel the earth and the mother is giving us instructions. And sometimes we hear the voice, sometimes we don't hear the voice. Now, the mother and the earth aren't exactly just planets or archetypes. they have, both of these have forms and functions, and they have structures that we are receiving. So the inner dance follows particular energies. For one, we can look at the Vesica Pisces or the helix model, where nature has an energy, and these are moving. There are movements within the energies of the earth that's moving up and down consistently. And sometimes we feel them, sometimes this energy has the point of intensity, like at the highest and lowest. Sometimes the point is like in the middle. And depending on where you meet people, the energy will either be in the middle space or will be at the highest or will be at the lowest. There are different ways of describing these energies. One of the representations would be to look at the actual wave frequency upon which what happened there? Upon which we experience something at its height or its lowest within a sequence, within a process of understanding things across time and as well as space. So we could describe that momentarily, like within our 2 hours together. So nature has vibration, nature has movement, and we come to understand that from the point of view of the person comprising like a mind, but also comprising of something embodied, something embodying consciousness. These two are the same. So when we hear the word spirit, soul, kundalini, Shakti, spirit, we come to a process in the world where all of that is also embodied. We're not here to separate mind and the body. They are coming into unity. And so there's a reason why we experience the energy like in different states. And when we lay down and when we go deep, there's something about going back to the nature of the body that we may not have understood. How are you encasing or containing a universe, or like electricity or life force in the body? So in a way, when we think about the earth, the mother, particularly like this question about earth movement, like earthquakes, for example, that could be interesting for sure. Because the body is shaking, the body is moving. So why is that happening even? Like, why do earthquakes happen, and why do body earthquakes happen? I think that could actually begin to explain the why, the what, the how. Okay, so let's okay, not that one first. Let's go back to this image here. One of the things that this brings into representation would be light. You could think of these waves in many different modes of dualities coming into unity. It could be the masculine, the feminine becoming one, the east and the west, hot and cold, light, let's say light and dark becoming one. But one of the best representations that have lasted and seem to signify much in the inner dance is it's about light. Light is basically an electromagnetic wave, which means light is electricity and magnetism turning into each other. So it's a helix, and it could just keep going on and on and on and on. So in particular, like when I think about the question around like the earth shaking, when does the earth undergo movements? When you think about the representations of electricity and magnetism, like in the world, electricity is that which raises, it's that which rises. So when people talk about the Kundalini rising, Kundalini would be more of the electricity in the body. Magnetism is that which holds down. When you think of a type of magnetism that is most common in the earth, it's gravity. It holds us down. It brings us into groundedness. So if we were to play with this, one interesting reading of the world is that the magnetism of the earth has arisen and electricity has fallen in a way that maybe we can bring this arrow down here, then put a line in the middle. The electricity in people's bodies has been lowered and the magnetism has been heightened. Magnetism is more of, let's say, when people talk about the mind, that we are stuck in the head, we are we have become too German. um, we're thinking too much. We're owing so much of life force to logic, to linearity. Then what we would say electricity is lowered. So in many ways, what is happening in our societies now is we're experiencing a shift where electricity is beginning to rise and magnetism is beginning to fall. And whenever that happens, change also is on its way. So what we're learning is how to lower that which is in resistance, that which is holding on. And when that happens, electricity tends to rise up. So this is the art. This is what we have been learning when we come into the study of what it means to invite or invoke the rising of the feminine, the rising of electricity. All of these possible techniques, all of these intuitions that we have found out, there are so many tools to allowing this particular thing to happen. It could be relatable to music. When you ask someone to lay down, this is the tool there is called proprioception. That the way you shape the body, the way you position the body alters the state of consciousness or the state of experience. There could be touch could be a tool. There could be kinesthesia, which is how the body begins to move on its own. But then there's also the visual and the auditory. Okay, so all of these are different sensory modalities. And there could be more. Actually, auditory is the same as music to begin with, but maybe music deserves its own space. There could be so much more. There could be electroception, magnetoception. There could be the sense of balance. There's so many different senses that come together in concert that brings about the descent and the ascent of one or the other. Okay, so let's clean up this space. So inner dance, or what many people now call the Kundalini rising experience. Okay, I'm just being messy right now because I'm experimenting with the format of just coming into all these to your questions. What we are learning is to safely allow for something to fall. Okay, so when a lot of people use the term Kundalini rising, there's something missing there. There has to be something that falls down for something to arise. So in many ways, the mind needs to fall, and then the energy in the body arises. And when that happens, a transformation or a change occurs. So we're almost just allowing more permission to that which was not permitted in the past. So when we look at, for example, the question regarding epilepsy, like what is epilepsy to begin with? And is the inner dance or is the work that we do safe for epileptics? Do we allow them into the space? To be honest with you, the first person I ever held a healing session with was epileptic. Now, epileptics are beings in the world. They don't have to be just humans. They could be animal epileptics. These are people who are very, very sensitive to magnetism to begin with. Okay, so if I was to maybe shift my screen, let's look at what epilepsy is. Okay, sorry, I'm looking for my cursor. Let's look at this particular one. What is epilepsy? So this is the old brain, and verily, like this is the new brain. And in the work that we do, we study the different regions of the brain, the different lobes, whereby there are manifestations depending on what part of the cortex is being affected. Is it the frontal cortex or the occipital, parietal, or temporal cortex? So a lot of the activations people are experiencing when the body is moving is taking place when there is a spreading of activation in the frontal cortex or the frontal lobe. When people see visions or colors, a lot of the activation is happening at the back of the head. Here's where sensations or the sense of space, the sense of position is happening. When emotions, memories, and extreme sensitivity to sound comes up, also smell. Some people can smell energy, then the activation is happening down here. A lot of this is relatable to epilepsy. When we experience epilepsy, one of the things that is happening is having spoken about light and electricity, epilepsy is a sudden distribution or spreading of neural firing patterns across the brain. Okay. So the brain is basically contralateralized. So when we look at the brain in this way, there are two brains. Okay. They're completely separate from each other. So for one reason or another, we're contralateralized. There are animals who don't have contralateralized brains, meaning the brains don't split their functions so that the left have very specific functions that are quite different from the right. So there's a yearning almost or an inclination for the human brain to become unilateral in many ways, not bilateral. And one of the ways it does that is to allow communication to happen across the different regions, whether it be the between the left and the right hemisphere. It could also be across, let's say, in this case with the arcuate fasciculus, it could be a communication between the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe, or it could be the other tracts that allow for communication either between, yes, the left and the right, or between the different cortices or lobes, or it could also be between the new brain and the old brain. Okay, the old brain performs very interesting functions that are autonomic and are not usually conscious. Okay, so to communicate, electricity becomes the actual pathway or highway mechanism. And mostly when you do ask someone to lay down and to close the eyes, and then when you begin to work with the body, so touch is not the primary way to communicate with the body. It's actually position. It's actually position. So one of the first things we do in the the journey process is, okay, we ask people to lay down. When I started this work 16 or 17 years ago, I wasn't actually asking people to lay down. I was merely touching them. And when I touched them, they would start to go into these altered states. They would go into past lives. They would see colors. Their bodies would move. But for one reason or another, as I started to travel the world, I realized it's actually good to ask everyone in the room to lay down. And there are reasons for that. We can cover that today. So yeah, let's go back to the screen. Okay, and and the biggest reason has to do with this. So when magnetism goes down, electricity goes up. This is actually studied from a physics perspective. Like when you study societies, there are actual physics that study the magnetism and the electricity of the earth. And in many ways, the magnetism of the earth is somewhat going down. And whenever magnetism goes down, resistance goes down. And the tendency is for electricity to go up. So for that reason, economic upheaval, depressions, maybe even physical disorders, disease patterns, world war, all of these can happen whenever magnetism drops, you know? So when magnetism is high, and electricity is low, what takes place is stability. When we go against change, when we're not transforming, magnetism tends to be higher. So there were actual physicists who were observing that right now this is the time for magnetism to lower. It's actually lowering and electricity is rising. Okay, so for that reason, what we're experiencing is not just stability, it's actually transformation. That this is not something we're causing. This was already on its way. And it was only a matter of time before what's happening in the earth also happens like inside of us. So it wouldn't just be earthquakes that I'd be thinking about. Like a lot of people are talking about climate change. And the climate change isn't just happening in the earth, it's actually happening in the body. So when you witness or feel people in the process, the body tends to get very, very hot in particular stages. But then it becomes very, very, writing that, it becomes cold all of a sudden. So energy communicates through temperature, and information is either stored like in the body. So people who are living in temperate climates like Germany, there's a lot of heat stored inside the body because of like climactic circumstance. But sometimes the body feels very cold, and there's a reason for that. One of the ancient names of the mother, aside from Kundalini, is liquid fire. The mother is very, very cold at times. When you feel her, you can feel this very, very cold energy. It's because heat is leaving the body, and a lot of that is happening within a spinal. Sorry, that's a G. It's happening in the spine. So we'll talk about the spine as well today. Okay. Let's go back to your questions just to make sure we're covering everyone. Oops. Okay, so let's tap into number 3. Let's go back to number 2 later on. What influence do you think nutrition and alcohol have on our energy? Sometimes I need to stop the screen and then do another share so that the iPad screen goes up. So nutrition, as you know, as I shared with you, plays a part. I lived in the island on light. I was living mostly in coconuts. Now, coconuts contain the highest electricity in all known foods in the world. It registers at 300 hertz. Very few nutrition in the world comes even close. Most of the foods that we eat range at maybe 50, maybe 30, okay? A lot of people, they turn to coffee for energy. Coffee registers at negative 20 hertz. So we think there's energy there, but there's only a simulation of energy. So when I was leaving coconuts, I was living on light. Now, the Philippines is the second largest producer of coconuts in the world. So I'm lucky enough to be in a country that has an abundance of electricity. And we're talking here about what is the source of your life force. So I was interested in becoming light and entering into light. That's why I lived on light nutrition. Now, a lot of people who conduct energy process or live in energy process, you will notice that after a session, are you either super hungry or are you not hungry? Very often you will feel very, very hungry. It's because the session is affecting what's called metabolism. And there are two aspects of metabolism. It's either the anabolic or the catabolic. Catabolic means to break things down. It's to digest old energies, and anabolic is to build up. Okay, so let's say you need to break down fats, carbohydrates into simple matter so that you can create or synthesize protein by building up amino acids. And okay, I think nutrition is really, really important. Okay, the subject of nutrition is very important because we're not accessing light in the body. So when I was living in coconuts, I was very interested in what's called enzymes. And basically, when you cook food, the enzymes will die. So I was interested in revitalizing the enzymes in my body. It's one of the biggest reasons why I lived on the island. So I feel that through evolution, we've learned to live a life with less life force. Enzymes are the life force mechanisms of the body. And most of the foods that we're eating, they don't contain live enzymes. When we cook food, enzymes will die. And enzymes are responsible for both the catabolic and the anabolic processes in the body. So when you conduct energy process, if you are if you're stabilizing, depending on the energy that you're holding, that's when there will be no hunger. But when you are in a process of transforming, that is when there will be hunger, because you're still like I don't know if you know like what a seesaw is, you know. Sometimes the seesaw is going up or it's going down, but very, very, very rare does it actually balance, because you're still looking for balance. So this is what you want to check in yourself and in others as you're conducting the work, because stabilizing and transforming have very, very different feelings and functions. And a lot of that has to do with the nervous system, with the hormones, with the neurotransmitters that allows the brain and the endocrine glands to communicate with each other. So how do we approach that? A lot of people are experiencing the changes, yes. And those changes can either be very long term or the changes can be very short
I
term. Yes. Oh, you're not seeing the screen?
just a
Uh,
moment. Could you
mhm.
use the pen a little bit bolder since the contrast here is there's lots of light in the room, so it can
Yeah.
be
Okay.
bolder so we
Yeah,
can read it here.
I agree with you. It's actually more if I like go closer, then it becomes bolder.
Ah,
We
okay.
go, yeah, it's like
Thank you.
you're welcome. So the changes can either be long term or short term. A lot of people, when they experience the energy, they say, my life changed. But then I would ask them, like, what do you mean? So some of the changes last very short, and some of the changes last long term. The short-term changes are also, though, like fast acting. So meaning when you experience the changes, you will experience them very, very fast, but they don't last very long. The long-term changes are very slow acting. So you may not experience the changes right away, but they last a long time. Now, short-term is usually connotative of changes in circuitry. So this has to do with light, with electricity and magnetism as it flows through the body. The long-term changes are more to do with the chemistry. So short-term changes will have more to do with the nervous system. So you can have an altered state of experience where it could be really big, you could like blast off into cosmic space. You can talk to the aliens, you can talk to the ancestors. You can have that, but the changes could last a day, a week, and then you'll want more and more and more. In terms of chemistry, the long-term changes have more to do with the endocrine system. These are the ones that maintain the more long-term changes. So don't be enamored or don't be too excited about changing people's experiences, because a lot of that are actually just changes in the nervous system, changes in brain states, and it can cause addiction quite a bit. The long-term changes are much, much more important. So some of these may not show up right away, but when they do show up, they tend to last a very, very long time. Um, so one of the things that we're tapping into in terms of the nervous system in the human is verily the autonomic nervous system. If you know anything about this, this is comprised of the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight or flight mechanism, or there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for um, resting, digesting, and in the work that we do, the word that we use is trust. When the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, people can trust. And when people are in the sympathetic, they're in fighting or fleeing or um, just being anxious, being afraid. So the work that we do is very often associated with the autonomic nervous system. The formulations of why the energy is happening is because there's a simultaneous co-activation between both. Now, normally it's very hard to activate these two at the same time because of seasons or because of the time of the day. There has to be a time when we rest, and then there has to be a time that we go to work, we go to school, we take care of the children. Now, when you study the workings of the human body, um, what we're doing in the process of inner dance or the Kundalini activation is we're allowing people to enter in a place of trust. But then when we learn to conduct trigger mechanisms, and this is already relatable to some of the questions that were asked, what we are triggering is like fear. So one of the manifestations of the energy, like when people share what's happening, people are able to become afraid without being scared. So even as we become fearless, we also are able to look at the nature of the fear, which is actually just an energy that got stuck in the body. So this becomes possible through this simultaneous co-activation of the autonomic nervous system's sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects. When we allow people to be scared without being afraid, that's the reason why we ask people to lay down and to close their eyes. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated. But then when we bring in music that would trigger people, we actually allow people to be scared. And then the scaredness is something that's able to be looked at. So we would study the ANS quite a bit. I'm trying to look for one that's not so messy. Actually, there's one that's less messy. It's this one. Okay, so let's study this, like in the long term, not just today. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible, as we've just talked about, for fear. And the outflows for the sympathetic nervous system is here. It's right here in the middle of the spine. So this is exactly accurate. It lists here thoracic 1 to thoracic 12. The more accurate mapping of the sympathetic nervous system is technically from thoracic 1 to lumbar 2. Okay, so fear has a region in the body. So there's a reason why there are certain regions that are touched, like in the process. I usually need to share supportive images that brings visibility to what we're talking about. So there's a reason why, people touch participants like in the chest or in the abdomen. It's because of thoracolumbar sympathetic outflows from T1 to L2. Now, when you study the extensions of the parasympathetic nervous system, the extensions or the outflows come out of 4 cranium or cranial nerves, nerve 3, 7, 9, and 10. I think about 70% of the parasympathetic nervous system's outflows, which, as we speak of, is responsible for resting, digesting, and trusting. 70% or maybe even up to 80% extends through the vagus nerve. So for those studying the polyvagal theory, that's actually quite supportive of. And then there's the sacrum extensions, which is at the bottom of the spine. So to go back to the anatomy, trust would extend like all over here. The 4 cranium nerves that we looked at, and then the sacrum, like down here. There's a reason why facilitation is involving the hips or the legs. So to go back to this particular picture, yeah, we get a sense not just of the convulsions or the shakings that are happening in the body. We become aware of what is happening, like here in the spine. There is a simultaneous co-activation of. I like to touch the head and the back of the head. There are many regions in the back of the head I go for, and I tend to hold the legs, the feet quite a bit. A lot of facilitators, they like to go for the hips. It's because they are simultaneously co-activating the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now you can do that through music. Don't have to touch the body. You can do that through words that give context. If you're able to allow people to trust and to be scared, at the same time, that co-activation will happen. Music would probably be the most effective, but one of the main tools that we're using is actually proprioception. Asking someone to lay down. Okay, starting with that, asking someone to lay down, you're already activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And what are the chemistries of the parasympathetic nervous system? It would be number one, oxytocin is the hormone of trust. If people have low oxytocin levels, then they're not able to trust. Then the space doesn't open. Then you have oh, sorry, yes.
The screen.
Okay. Yeah, you have to let me know when that happens. I have to stop and then I have to restart. Okay. Acetylcholine, like cholinergic actions, slow down the heartbeat, slow down the heart rate, slows down the breath. It relaxes the body, okay? Contracts the pupils. And then what else would be there? Like serotonin. What else would be there? GABA. All of these inhibit, they depress, they slow down speed. So when you simply by asking someone to lay down, you're already sending out these chemicals, these chemistries. But then when you bring in the trigger mechanisms, which could be touch, yeah, it could be certain musics that would, let's say, raise rhythm, tempo, or BPM levels, which has a way of sending, let's say, certain neurotransmitters to the SA node in the heart that establishes how fast or how slow the heart will be beating. So the chemistries for the sympathetic would be anything from dopamine to adrenaline or epinephrine. There could also be orexin. All of these things that make it difficult to go to sleep. Now, speaking of sleep, for example, one of the primary chemicals that we secrete when we ask people to lay down is melatonin. Melatonin, as many of you know, is responsible for bringing people into the REM state or to go to sleep. When you literally ask someone to lay down, even while it's daytime, you actually raise melatonin levels. And melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland, which some people offer up as a third eye. So here, adrenaline, orexin, norepinephrine or noradrenaline. And then there would also be the stress hormone, which is cortisol. Okay, so I mean, when you look back at the body, when you bring awareness back to the body, actually, maybe this picture is better. When you bring a lot of focus to this part, the abdominal region, people talk about the solar plexus or the yellow chakra. Now, the endocrine system that is relatable to the yellow chakra is the adrenal system. The adrenal gland is composed of the adrenal medulla and the adrenal, the adrenal cortex. These two parts secrete stress and energy, but also fighting. So there's a lot of power there, but there's also a lot of competition, a lot of stress. So when we overstimulate this part, and a lot of people talk about Kundalini, they like to think about this part. When you think about that from a physical perspective, when you have an overabundance of cortisol and epinephrine in your system, it actually brings about too much sensitivity, sleeplessness. It can bring about anxiety, and like, so the slowness would emanate from melatonin levels, serotonin levels. Dopamine, you can feel a lot in the body. Serotonin, you can feel a lot more here. So it's really important to actually balance out this whole region, that if you're going to work in this, and work here. So that the activations can be a lot more long-term and slow acting. When you try to activate bodies too much, and this is a category mistake new facilitators make, they get really excited when the body shakes, convulses, goes into movements. A lot of that is actually adrenergic in nature, which is much, much too stimulating, and that can really imbalance the body in the long term. So you go to the other regions, you bring about the rest phases when you design the music element, or when you learn how to hold the body. Don't forget that the body has many, many regions. So one of the first advice that I give actually is, when you begin a session, the first thing I normally do is I extend the right arm. Now the arms are extensions of the heart and the brain. Okay, the heart is contralateralized, so is the brain. The right arm is an extension of the left brain. The left brain is the sequential thinking part of the brain. It likes to process things one at a time. The right brain processes things simultaneously, like all at once. But this is mostly true of right-handed people. For left-handed people, language exists in the right brain, but because most people in the world will be right-handed, safely, if you extend the right arm, you actually open up the left side of the brain, the masculine brain, the brain where the father line extends from. And when you open up the left brain, because the right brain is already open, then the electricity between both hemispheres can more or less pass through. And that can be a balancing process already. Okay, so let's go back to the screen. So these are just simple mechanisms. They can be advice, they can be things for you to study, like in the long term. The simultaneous co-activation is something we're putting forward to science. When we work with doctors, scientists, this is what we are proposing. And the scientists that have studied the simultaneous co-activation of both, there's something interesting that brings correlations to all the examples of when are the moments that we activate these both at the same time. These both are active when, let's say, we enter the REM state in the dream, when we take a hallucinogenic substance, like a psychedelic, is a simultaneous co-activation, because a hallucinogen is basically a both at the same time. It's both a stimulant, contains stimulating chemistries, and it's also a depressant at the same time. So that's why the sympathetic and the parasympathetic are co-activated in the ayahuasca journey or the magic mushroom journey. When people enter the one interesting study that I've often looked back at is a study by a neurosurgeon called Kevin Nelson, and he was studying the spiritual doorway of the brain. He was very interested in the life review that takes place during the near-death experience. You probably heard about it, like when people die and come back to talk about it. They say, my whole life flashed before my very eyes, like in the span of a very, very short amount of time. It could be like a second or a blip of a second. I watched my whole life flash before my consciousness. In the birth process, which is the opposite of death, there also needs to be a co-activation. And then in the spiritual awakening, if you measure the body, when a spiritual awakening is happening, there is a simultaneous co-activation of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. I mean, these are both on usually at the same time. It's just that either the sympathetic would dominate or the parasympathetic would dominate, but it's very hard for these to activate in an extreme polar way at the same time. So I leave that to you to research. What I do realize when I look at these different examples, like going into the dream, going into the psychedelic journey, the life review. It doesn't mean I'm promoting psychedelics. I don't believe we need to do psychedelics if you can actually conduct the internal chemistries that allow for these to activate. Like people are using outside interventions of what happens actually internally. When you study all these dreams, psychedelic journeys, life reviews, birth processes, and spiritual awakenings, what do you see? Like what is common amongst all these? What I see is just an alteration of what's called time, or the experience or perception of time. Time perception is an actual scientific study that there are certain things that we ingest or are exposed to in the world that alters time. And when you study the science of the circadian rhythms, there's actually like a German term that is used to take in what is it that sets the clock of the body. What is it that sets the light and dark cycle, like in the body, that allows for, let's say, melatonin, cortisol, epinephrine levels to go up and down depending on the time of the day. Now, the term for that that helps us to understand entrainment is in German, it's called Zeit. And then the second word would be Geber. So anything that you ingest, anything that you're exposed to during the 24-hour or 12-month cycle will program the clock. And that could be a food, that could be a beverage, that could be something you smoke, that could be the music that you're exposed to, that could be the sun, the moon, that could be temperature. Anything that alters time alters the clock. So what we are doing in the process is we're actually altering people's clocks, because here clock goes faster, here clock goes slower. And when you know how to work out the clock, you can alter temperature in the body. You can alter like many things, you can literally change people's hearts. You can change heartbeats. You can alter breath rates. Anything to do with the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that you do not have control over. The autonomic nervous system controls the sleep-wake cycle. It controls the heart rate. It controls breathing. It controls digestion. It controls reproduction, and so on and so forth. You don't control your heartbeat. If I ask you now, I'll pay you like a lot of money. I'd like you to control your heartbeat for a whole month. Okay, like I'd like your heart to go at exactly 111 beats. No, that's too thick. Beats per minute. So can you see the power that's being given to people who are conducting this work? Scientists, doctors purport that the autonomic nervous system is that which cannot be controlled, but actually through the process of entrainment, circadian entrainment, we can actually control people's heartbeats. So that's why we're studying music. Certain musics can entrain brain, breath, and blood in certain ways. And that's where the playlist comes about. Okay, the inner dance playlist has been something I've been studying for a long time. That there's this particular wave that rises and falls, goes up and down, goes up, down, that comprises how the energy expands and it contracts in different stages. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This could be delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. There's a whole art, there's a whole structure in why we start the process like here, down here. Why does the music start low and then why does it climb up? And why does it drop down again, maybe 10 to 15 minutes along the way? That's in inner dance anyway, which we have been studying for almost 2 decades now. Slow wave sleep is a part of the stages of sleep, sleep stages. There being 5 normal stages, that being non-REM 1, non-REM 2, non-REM 3, which is slow wave sleep, then REM state, and then we go back to non-REM 2. So there's a reason why we design the music as we do. And we have been sharing the design of this music for a long time. We actually follow what's called 12 stages. I don't have time to go into that today, but I will take you onto a journey of the Inner Dance playlist. Wait, where's my cursor? It's very weird. Like the cursor moves to my iPad and then I lose it. Okay. This is very annoying. Huh. Okay, so now it's there. I can see it in my iPad. Let me wait, let me unplug. It's still there. It's very annoying. Okay, there. So let's go to the web. This is a work site. So I just want to take you a little bit into the history of this work. So a lot of the mechanisms, the techniques that have come out of, especially what's becoming popular is Kundalini activation. A lot of that began through the inner dance work. In the way music, at least, is being performed with people being asked to lay down and then certain movements of the body start to come about. So in my experience, that began in 2006, 2007. At that time, we didn't even have a name for it. No music was being used. It's a very long story in my process when I was living in the earth. I was living in an island alone. These are the feedbacks that I was already having. I was merely touching people in different parts of the body, and this was already happening. And then in 2008, I wanted to study how we could scale this, that this could be shared globally so that it could help more people. So for me, music was actually quite important because music as an entrainment device activates much of the brain, much more than most other sensory inputs can perform. And these were the feedbacks. And it is quite interesting, like from 2009 onwards, we were using the same songs globally. Some of these songs have still made it through a lot of processes, but we've already left the stage that was quite popular back then. And because I drew the map for you, we were following the 12 stages and the sleep stages that brings people into REM states or dream states. I think I probably stopped using those songs in 2016 or 17. And then there was a time when we weren't even using music anymore. We would just be using words or dialogues, and then there were these corresponding feedbacks. We learned to layer songs because we realized that the more layers we hold, the greater brain activations occur, and the energy spreads throughout the whole body that people enter into different dimensions. So same feedbacks, people were irritated in the beginning, but then they would pass out. And then when we learn to go into that more so in the digital way, that's when the energy really exploded. So I was using this primarily 2016, maybe up until 2018. And then there was this point where we stopped using music at all. We would use noise or sounds from the earth, sounds from space. And what that did is it brought people deep into the non-personal. Like a lot of the experiences people would say is they weren't going into the emotions anymore. They weren't going to loops, back into trauma, back into childhood memories. They went back to the memory of what it means to have been on the earth for a long time. The experience really expanded. And for that reason, the womb, there was the question about the womb. People always gone back to the womb. So there's a lot of memories of going back to the womb. We literally take sounds from the actual womb of the mother, the human mother, and then we would mix that into the playlist and you could see what that did. That was really amazing. So later on, we began to rely on noise generators, like the Noise app in particular. And My Noise, this became the most powerful tool that up to now a lot of people are still using, and it's still relatable to the shift from, I mentioned here, very very personal experiences, very emotional, and here, very impersonal, very planetary experiences, very cosmic. This would be almost the same as Deep Story, but to systematize things by way of learning how to conduct the waves through space and time in a more professional way. So right now, a lot of people are exposed to this. This is the norm for many Kundalini activation communities. And maybe in some inner dance communities, this is still being used. Now, when you study this, there's a lot of similarities with how inner dance began. And then those who are going into the popularization of different modalities of inner dance, when people change the name from inner dance to other modalities like Kundalini activation process, a lot of facilitators are going back to how we used to do things way back in 2009, all the way to 2016. So the feedbacks are still quite the same as how they used to be. When in fact, in some of these elements, the body isn't moving so much anymore. And now people are very interested in it being about the body movement, about the Kundalini thing, okay? Body moving, body shaking. When we actually graduated from that a long time ago and we realized that there could be a lot more experience when the body isn't moving anymore. So sometimes when people attend trainings, the instructions are the body has to move because when the body isn't moving, it means the energy is blocked. Don't get stuck with that. It will trap you into thinking that that's all there is. During the pandemic, we really just went into the studio, and this is very freeing. When we learn to work with digital audio workstations, a lot of the ego that exists in these stages where there's always the mediation where the facilitator is always there and you have to be the powerful one. The ego rises in those who are changing people's lives and are amazing healers. When we learn to systematize things and work with digital audio workstations, it became a realization that the healer doesn't even need to be there, that people laying down to their own processes could actually lead to like healings that don't require dependency or reliance, that the healing happens on its own, that we don't need the healer from outside to validate that this can happen independently on its own. So we were able to systematize things in a way that this could scale, that sometimes people would write me and I just literally send them a playlist and whatever they were dealing with, it be dealt with in the most responsible way, not in this guru disciple healer healy dynamic, that is part of the old story that we're shifting away from. Because when I think about my story, I didn't have a healer, a teacher when I was living on the island alone. The healing happened on its own when I was one with the mother and one with the earth. I don't want to explain this too much. It takes too many words. This is what we're working with. We are interested in electricity in the brain, the body, and the nervous system. So we're working with doctors, scientists, and musicians, bringing together neurology and music theory that hopes to understand how music actually brings structure to how information is stored in the body. So in that way, music is not staying the same or staying stable. Music is changing, and when you allow the energy to express itself through musical forms, we experience very different genres of music. Strange music starts to come out that matches with where the brain and the nervous system is already at. This is one of the most interesting things to come out of the inner dance. This is just about a year or two. I was actually working with some doctors from Germany who were here to undergo a training when I received a request from a woman in London to help a small young boy in living in the UK. So I constructed a 3-hour playlist, and I did it very quickly, like just in maybe the span of 15 minutes. I sent this child a sleep-based playlist, and the results were amazing. That playlist is spread throughout different parts of Europe and Asia, and now we're working with a lot of doctors and a lot of healers and a lot of psychiatrists, and we're realizing that some of the most amazing journeys you can have would be when you're sleeping. Sleeping is not just an escape mechanism. You can actually awake while you're sleeping. It's not just lucid dreaming. The subconscious or the unconscious mind can find its way into greater and greater awareness. So this is amazing. Let's see, let's say an image from yellow. I think there's an image in yellow. Okay, so this is the inner dance playlist. Now, we've been exposing people to this wave. There's a whole reason why we start out here, down in Delta, all the way, this is Gamma. There's a reason why we start slow and then we go up and down. Again, this is slow wave sleep or non-REM 3 stage. This is very important in your design process before you bring people into REM or the dream states. Now, the whole logic here is that we've been exposing people to this format, this energy wave for almost 20 years now, going towards 20 years anyway. And what we realize is we can bring people into the dream state whilst awake. That is what a simultaneous co-activation looks like. But what does it mean to expose people to that whilst they're sleeping? I think to become more aware of this. Okay, having a problem with my cursor again. We need to look at charts like this. Now, this is a chart that explains how we journey into the most ideal state where the most healing happens, the most awakenings happen. That's in the REM state here. Now, notice that
Sorry,
the longest REM state, yes.
The screen is not shared at the moment.
Oh, okay, I see. That should be an easy fix at least. Thank you. Here. Okay, so these are the sleep cycles, and this would be the longest REM state, like towards the end of the night, and this would be the shortest. Now notice how you need more non-REM 3. This is an old structure. You don't really have stage 4 anymore. Stage 3 and 4 are technically the same. But here in this chart, there's more non-REM 4 happening in the early onset of sleep, at the onset of sleep, like hour 1, 2, and 3, but later on don't need it anymore. The reason why we're able to go into this in the journey very quickly is we're able to allow people to drop down into non-REM very fast during the first 10 to 15 minutes of the process. And when we raise the energy higher and higher, we're actually able to hold delta state even as we're able to raise the state into gamma. So to go back into this is what this means, like delta, theta, alpha, this is mu, beta, gamma. REM state would be one's ability to hold gamma and delta at the same time. That's why there's this spectrum here, this spectral connection between the lowest and the highest. Mostly when we are awake, when we go to work, when we're worried about money, taking care of the kids, studying in school, a lot of the brainwave activity would be happening somewhere in between alpha and beta, and we're not able to raise vibratory levels of consciousness into gamma. And one of the logics in which the sleep stages happens is you actually need to drop down deep into delta state before you can raise up. You see the paradox there. For you to go high, you actually need to go low. And when you wake up, you go somewhere in the middle. So when you go to sleep, what you're looking for is the co-activation of the highest and the lowest. That's what the simultaneous co-activation means. You want to go high and you want to go low at the same time. It's very hard for the body to do that. Most people will call this a state of flow. And for a lot of people to experience that much energy flow, you can only do it while you are sleeping. I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So when I was living on the island, I was living in coconuts, right? I became a breatharian at one point. I stopped eating for more than 30 days and stopped drinking anything. Because I wasn't hungry. I just didn't want food anymore. So I saw the correlation between stress and hunger, that when you're anxious and stressed out, when you're overthinking, you actually produce a lot of gastrointestinal acid in your stomach. And a lot of that bleeds out into your duodenum, into your intestines. And when that happens, that acid will want to feed on something. And that's when you get hungry. Otherwise, you would get an ulcer if you didn't eat anything. So when you're stressed out, when you're in the city, when you're in society, it's very hard not to experience some of those stress levels. So human evolution had learned to deal with the stress levels by managing problems and so on and so forth. But a lot of that's managed through food. So I realized that when you're not exposed to that many people, when I was a hermit, I was alone, I wasn't exposed to anyone. When there was no people outside or around me, I wasn't hungry. So I realized food is a very, very social thing. So when you stop eating, I was eating maybe 5 coconuts a day, and I reduced that to 3 coconuts a day. I reduced that to about 1 coconut a day. I stopped sleeping, basically. This is one of the strangest things ever to have happened to me. I was sleeping literally like not hours a day, but hours a week. Something like 10 hours a week or 5 hours a week. So do you know what inner dance is? Do you know what this Kundalini thing is? It's actually the ability to enter into REM state while awake. And when you go into REM state while awake, you reduce your need for achieving that while you're sleeping. Now, I'm not against sleep. I think sleep is a good idea. I think it's a good innovation. It's a technology that we needed. But I don't sleep that much, and I accomplish a lot more. I learn musical instruments. I read books. I prepare for all the trainings I have to do. When I wake up, I take care of the kids, and I conduct eco-village things. But at night, there's so much that I'm so interested in, and I am able to do it. It's already quite amazing that I was able to do that on the island because no one was there. But right now, I do need this extra time. And I'm living a more optimal life when I'm not just escaping into other realms. So a lot of you might have noticed that when you started to conduct this work, that your sleep cycles might have been shifting. It's either the quality of sleep, it's maybe the amount of dreams, but more often than not, people are not sleeping as much, and then they get weirded out, they find that strange, and then they try to correct that by forcing themselves to sleep. But when you're achieving REM state while you're awake, you don't actually need to sleep that much. So that's what the wave conducts, that we are able to gain what we're normally able to gain while we're sleeping, but this time not escaping, but really confronting, really looking at the things that we're not able to always to look at. And it's part of the spiritual awakening. But I feel beyond that, it actually leads to heightened intelligence. It leads to genius or brilliance when you're able to hold the highest and the lowest, because the highest holds a lot of information, and the lower frequencies, they perform the channeling. They provide containment for what is passing through, which is data, which is information, which then starts to organize, like in the body when the brain goes through the shifts. So you won't have the same brain maybe next year, years from now, compared to yesterday or a year ago. Let's make sure I'm not losing my way. Let's look back at the questions. If I can find my cursor back there. Okay. How does womb healing work? Generally, does it work during Kundalini activation too? I can't answer the Kundalini activation thing because I don't use the word Kundalini activation. But I do know the work that I do. I don't need to call it inner dance. Let's go into website. Let's see. No, not that one. Maybe this one. So this is historical. I want to look at some of the early sharings or expressions of the inner dance. Like this is way back. I started holding space for others in 2008 publicly. And this already came out in the biggest newspaper in the Philippines. And the writer described what had happened. I went into a trance and fell from my chair to the floor into a journey from my present adult life to childhood and then birth. I saw inside the womb of my mother, and then I went forward in time until I reached my present age. This is an inner rebirth, a powerful experience I could not forget. Now, Jimmy Licauco wrote 5 articles in the Philippine Daily Inquirer because of this experience that he had. So this supports the observation that I put in, that when you conduct a simultaneous co-activation, there's an alteration of time perception. Now, the womb experience is one of the most common I hear when I bring people into the experience. One of the most common sharings that I hear is I went back to the womb. Now, for me, the womb is not just a place. It's not just a memory. It's a state of consciousness. I think if we were to then study that state of consciousness and relate it to some of the things that we've already spoken about, I'm looking for my Apple pen. There it is. Where's the notes? It's there. Ignore limit. I don't know what this limit thing is. Okay, so when we were in the womb, say this is a baby, and let's just say I'm the worst artist in the whole world, which I am. This is like the baby, or no, not the baby, but the fetus. And this is the womb. Studying this is the dream, this is the dream journey, right? Do babies dream? Do fetuses dream? they may not even understand the question because they don't differentiate between wake and dream. Now, studying um, the so-called REM state. Let's look at the percentages and basing it on what I've already spoken about, me not sleeping that much. Right now, like what time is it? As you can see, it's 12:23. Normally my Zoom calls are 2 o'clock in the morning. So I wake up at 1 o'clock and I stay up all the way to 5 or 6 already. Take a 30-minute nap and then I'm off for the day at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like a baby. I don't differentiate between wake and sleep. I'm very strange in that way. Now most adults would sleep 1/3 of the day or 30% of the day. So that's 8 hours, right? So within that 1/3, we're achieving REM state only 15% of the time. That's how little we're experiencing REM state. Now let's look for the baby. A baby, especially in the last week in the mother's womb, in the last week of the mother's womb, the baby was sleeping 90 to 95%. Let's be radical, let's say 95%. But it could just be as little as 90% the baby is sleeping as much. And in that time, the baby is dreaming 90 to 95% of the time. So can you see the difference? 95 to 95% as compared or contrasted with 15% of 30%. That's what we lost. So this is the reason why we don't actually teach anyone anything. We're merely I just realized I never saw that. We're remembering something we knew in the beginning. That's really cool. We're remembering the origins, the source, the roots of consciousness, which we forgot. Like I mentioned like the life review that happens at the moment of death. When you die, you will have the life review in the near-death experiences that people had. But there are people who go to death long enough and come back to say that there's something that comes after the life review. And that's the experience of what happens before birth. And that's called the birth vision. And in the birth vision, before you came here, before life, before you were born, you actually looked at yourself completely before you came here. That is what it means to dream. To look at everything simultaneously, not in time, not sequentially one at a time, but in complete simultaneity, like all at once. You were looking at your life all at once. You're dreaming yourself into being, basically. And this is to say, this is what we lost. So can you see what we are giving to our people? The ability to dream again. The ability to dream again. And if you were to go back to this, do you see then what you're gifting people? You're gifting time. The Zeitgeber is, and I'm sure I'm not saying that the right way. You're gifting time. You're giving people time, because one of the biggest fears people have around death is I don't have enough time. But the true nature of time is actually space. And what we're giving people is space because that's what they lost, and this is what the dream brings about. So going back to the womb is definitely part of the work that we do. But what is the womb? What is at the heart of the womb? What is in the middle of the womb? It's also at the middle of what happens when we die. But in between womb and tomb, we also are searching for home. So it's the Om, it's the vibration, it's the sound, it's the music of the universe. That is the source and the destination. that is really looking for full circle. And when you study the actual nature of vibration, they are states of consciousness. It's lower and higher. And we got stuck within a BPM that's normal. But what we're looking for is the extreme. And when we don't differentiate this or that, one or the other, then we go back to the, where we were already. So if I can have control of my computer back, please. I need my cursor. Oh, wait. That's weird. No, it's getting stuck in my iPad there. Okay, give me. Very trippy. I'm trying to go back to the questions. Okay, maybe I need to stop the sharing too. No. Okay, maybe Sigrid, could you remind me what the questions are? Or I think it's in my phone. Yeah. What else have we not covered? If we could help. Oh, wait. Sorry. I have it. I have my screen.
Okay.
Never mind. Yeah, never mind. Maybe this is better. So I would say I've answered this by stating that I began with outdoor sessions myself, like it's about nature. I think we're okay with this. Alcohol is a depressant, so it does activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Done with that. Okay, this could be interesting. Grounding. What is okay? Epilepsy. Let's go into epilepsy a little bit. This is an interesting one. Take that last. I'm not sure how to approach this. I think this we've touched on enough. All right. Okay, let's go to this one. Okay, so a screen would be important for this one. All right, so here, this is the autonomic nervous system. We're tapping into the autonomic nervous system, which we defined as the part of the peripheral nervous system that you cannot control. Now, when people then ask, what about my breath work? What about my yoga? What about the other spiritual practices? How does that relate to this work, this type of work that we're studying? Now, that's a whole different part of the nervous system. That's called the somatic nervous system. So when you think about the breath of fire, if you're going to do that at will, you're still ordering your breath or your lungs to do the inhale or the outflow, the exhale. So you're tapping into this, and then when you drop in, you move into this. So, for example, a lot of yoga teachers, and yoga is very much involved with the somatic nervous system. It helps us to confront our fears, to go beyond or transcend our limits. So a lot of yoga teachers, I mean, I'm talking about westernized yoga. I'm not talking about the true yoga that hadn't been industrialized and boxed in. A lot of yoga teachers, when they study inner dance, they realize that they're in the beginning, when you conduct your yoga, say, let me try to be an artist here, never done a yoga. Let's say this is a yoga, something. You're doing your yoga. Let's say that's your yoga. or it's not very yoga. It just looks like he's just hanging out. Let's say you're doing something very hard. You're doing your yoga. And then let's say bulk of your yoga, let's say 90 to 95% of my yoga is spent within the asana practice. And then let's say 95%, let's say that 95%, and 5% you give to your shavasana. Um, when people start to study this work, and then they realize that, wow, okay, why am I not harvesting the fruits of that work? That's already a simultaneous co-activation, because the sympathetic nervous system initially, like the breath of fire or your asana, you raise the vibration, and then when you drop it, all of a sudden, and then when you study this, right, you're sending out your cortisol, your adrenaline, your norepinephrine, and then suddenly you release the from melatonin to acetylcholine to serotonin, oxytocin. Suddenly people enter into time perception. And there are a lot of people who in the shavasana, they do start to explode. It's just that in the yoga practice, people aren't used to that. So when yoga teachers discover this work, then the asana would be maybe much less. They might even go for like, okay, what about I raise the vibration 50% of the time, and then I drop it 50% of the time. They realize, why am I not harvesting the gifts of Shava? If you know who Shava is, Shava is the corpse. He is the symbol for death. And when Shava surrenders, that is when Shakti can actually enter and channel and pass through the body. And when when Shakti passes through, that leads to the realization of Shiva. So you realize Shiva is actually Shakti and Shava becoming one. And when we are too much in our thinking process, we lose the chance of laying down. So studying the breath of fire, studying yoga, studying any discipline that required the activation of the somatic will-based nervous system. This is like I said, this is a very, very different set of outflows and inflows. So what we did is we reversed yoga, as you can see. Like we started inner dance, and the work that we do starts with the opposite. We actually start with shavasana, and then the yoga teacher awakens from within. So we start with the autonomic nervous system, and then some kind of automatic somatic starts to arise. Now, why do that? What's the importance? What's the point? This is the point. The autonomic nervous system basically conducts the conditionings and the programs that we've stored since we were young. So our response mechanisms or our reaction mechanisms, because let's say we're acting too much in terms of it doesn't have to be us, like people who have trigger mechanisms that's normalized, that came from the past, right? And so on and so forth. It could be shame or guilt, blame. We are activating people's autonomic nervous systems to get them to react differently to how they might have experienced things before. So anger can lead to like forgiveness, shame can lead to self-love, anxiety can lead to courage, let's say depression or despair can lead to joy. So we bring out the real, the authentic inside people's bodies in the hope that there could be a change in the program, because that's how the autonomic nervous system functions, right? You don't have control over your emotions. You can't help it if you feel small. You can't help it if you feel sad or you're anxious or you're angry. To allow yourself to feel the emotions actually is the start of the change. But then when you allow yourself like another option, another set of possibilities, that's where the autonomic nervous system, spiritual discipline can contribute to sometimes what the somatic nervous system does not. Because when you're trying too hard, and a lot of you might have done that, then there's this energy of want, of desire, in terms of this, spirit and science of letting go. There's something that works faster. And for that reason, a lot of doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, yoga teachers, a lot of healers, a lot of shamans, they're turning to this work because that simultaneous co-activation can go straight to what needs to be worked on, which is the heart of the programming. Okay, so that's that at least. No, of course not. Like I've seen so many healings happen, especially with this, but I've seen cancer disappear. I've seen almost every kind of illness disappear from the work that we do. So session should be recommended for people who have all sorts, like in general, work on the normalization of the autonomic nervous system, and it will help. It doesn't mean the illness will go away, but from somewhat a dimension, depending on how you work in the wave. If you're imbalancing, then yes, maybe be wary. If you're exposed more to the intense, then study more grounding processes. And then for you, you will have a vocabulary, you will have options of the energy. That's not just how you have come to know this, which is all over Instagram, or the popularized version of this is not the only form of this energy. So study and get exposed. Do you have tools for grounding except the common ones? And what does it mean to have it for, say, 60 years or more? I guess that means like to be able to sustain the energy. One thing would be like what I just mentioned. Don't forget the somatic. So exercise is really good. Eating the right food is really good. But what I do is I study a lot. Why is that important? And in Europe, this should be important. Let's say, okay, please give me my. It's my computer's autonomic nervous system. I'm losing control. It's never done this before. I think it's the screen time thing. Wait. Okay, maybe. Oh, there. Okay. Okay, do it really slow. But then I do that, then. Hmm. Okay, it should be related to this. The grounding thing can be related to this. Okay, what I'm really trying to do here, okay, is I'm trying to access this one. All right, so when you send out so much electricity through the nerve tracts or these electricity pathways, what happens is you actually do something interesting, was you clean the brain. you clean the brain of patterns. So there's an opportunity and a problem there. And one of the problems is you actually start to clean the language sectors of the brain. Now, this part of the brain is called the Broca's area. And here in the superior temporal gyrus, the Wernicke's area would be here. Now, the Broca's area is responsible for producing language, for producing speech. So one of the reasons why people go into light language, I don't know if you've experienced that or you've seen that in other people. That's one of the results for this thing right here. When you send a lot of electricity through the pathways. So you know, like when you watch the body, should have done that. Okay. All right. Let me do it slow. Okay. When you go through the process and when this starts to happen, you know, like a lot of people are probably thinking he's attending a workshop. This guy attended a session and he's going through a catharsis. This is actually a chart that belongs to epilepsy. Like this guy is having an epileptic seizure. And there are different phases of epilepsy. There could be the tonus, the clonus, the myoclonus, the postictal stage, the aura phase. All of these we study in inner dance because they are very depictive of what's happening in the brain, electricity-wise. So, okay, thank you. You know what scientists and doctors used to do when people were having epileptic seizures? They would actually cut the corpus callosum, which allows the left and the right hemisphere to communicate with each other. Now, we don't actually know why, from a scientific perspective, why an epileptic seizure happens. Now, a seizure happens when there is a sudden spreading of activation of neural firing patterns throughout different sections of the brain. So there could be a frontal lobe epilepsy or an occipital lobe epilepsy or parietal epilepsy or temporal epilepsy. And these different epilepsies would give different manifestations of what would happen to people. It could be emotional, it could be visual, it could be the body moving. So an epilepsy doesn't just have to be the body shaking, the body going into convulsions. There are different types of epilepsies. So I want you to consider the fact that you are actually invoking epilepsy inside your system. And when Kundalini was studied in Western science, it was determined that Kundalini is epilepsy. There's very, very close relationships there. So that when you study the list of manifestations of epilepsy, you will find that they are almost exactly the same as the list of Kundalini symptoms. So this is where the East and the West would meet with each other. So when you study the epileptics of the world, what you would find are also the geniuses like Alexander the Great, Leonardo da Vinci, Albert Einstein, a lot of the most amazing thinkers and a lot of amazing musicians. They allowed electricity to spread across the system. And I think one of the biggest fears of humans is the fear of losing control. And I think one of the fears or stigmas with epilepsy is when we see someone having a seizure, what we're seeing is someone's losing control. When you see someone in an inner dance state, you're seeing someone lose control. See someone in a Kundalini rising experience, you're seeing someone losing control. So I think we are, like right now, letting go of that fear. And now we're losing control, but in a way we're actually gaining it. It just depends on like who or what is in control. And if you are light, if you are electricity, then what's gaining control would be just bigger manifestation of who you are. The true birth vision is the grandest expression of love and light that any one being can experience, and that you receive in your dream state, either when you're sleeping or when you were in the womb. Okay, so I'm going to stop. We actually are almost 2 hours already, just to give space for any way you want to close. It could be more questions, it could be insights, it could be, yeah, just anything. So, Sigrid, if you can, yeah, open the space in case anyone would like to.
Sure. We have some questions here coming up. Just if you come here, so that you just can you say your
Hello.
name and
My name is Melida, and my question is, how does the COVID vaccination affect the body and the spiritual awakening and the Kundalini awakening?
Oh, okay. I don't have a clear stand in this. Right before COVID really exploded in the world, I got very sick, and it was all the COVID symptoms. Now, I live in Palawan, where there's quite a lot of Chinese tourists. So in me, I believe that I was going through the process. When COVID happened, I was actually happy because I lived as a hermit alone, and I was really happy when the world slowed down. So I didn't mind it. I believe in the virus. I believe in biodiversity inside animals and humans, and I believe that that's how we evolved. So when we isolated one virus out of tens of thousands in the body, then I felt that we were limiting our potential. I believe that when we get sick, that's actually when we build immunity. That's when we heal. So I believe that when we take on a virus, then we evolve. But I actually believe that if we take on a vaccine, we can handle anything. So I was not against the vaccine. I'm not vaccinated. I wasn't interested in that. But if I was forced to, I actually would have been interested in what can I do with this, because we're taking in so much toxicity every day that's so much worse than what got injected into people's bodies on a daily basis. Lifestyle-wise, we're eating all the wrong things. When I lived alone on light, like I was able to reach the highest possibilities. But I was also interested in falling down. So when I went back to the world, I became curious as to what would it mean to start eating what other people are eating and drinking. So my energy just dropped. I went so low, but there was more healing in learning to get back up. So I learned to go up and down until I don't go down anymore when I expose myself to things that are difficult. One of the reasons why I did that is because I have 2 children, and as a father, I didn't want to alienate myself from society. I wanted to understand the human. So I believe that the human is an experiment of the earth, just like many things are, but humans are especially parts of the bodies of earth that's experimenting in relation to consciousness, in relation to states of being. And I feel over the centuries or the millennia, that experimentation has really brought forward opportunities and problems. Like thinking about food alone, for example, like when you think of stimulants like coffee, when you study the caffeine intake of Europeans, Europeans and Westerners weren't actually drinking that much tea or coffee. When they tasted this is one of the reasons why colonization even got to that point. It did something to people's brains, minds, and bodies. And so people started to stimulate themselves all the more and more and more, because it helped us to wake up in the morning, get to work, and focus more and get to achieve more. But then when we stimulated ourselves that much more and more and more, we actually then needed to depress ourselves because we couldn't get to sleep anymore. Like one of the stimulants generally for humans is artificial lighting, electronic gadgets that they're using late at night, when in deep history, when the sun went down, then we were listening more than looking. So we altered our brains. So at the end of the day, people drink too much alcohol. And then when they wake up, they drink too much coffee. That's a psychedelic phenomenon where we're stretching out slow and fast, low and high, because it's helping us to hold on to more abstract information within a concrete experience. Like the mind transformed itself through substance. Now, it's happening now. If we didn't need these vaccines and so on and so forth, we would learn to hack our system from inside. And that's what the sensitivity, that's what the explorations, that's what these body experimentations are happening. So I think it's really good that we're beginning to have dialogues about this, not just to make this a mysticism, not just to make this mysterious and shamanic, to bring in the science, to bring in more dialogues, to like here in the Philippines and in Europe as well, and in different parts of the Americas, the inner dance is not spiritual modality so much. We're now inside the school system. We're building curriculums with actual schools based on the energy process. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, it's because you're thinking about this with people laying down, crying, screaming all over the place. That's merely the thing that you see in media or what got popular. This is already in prison systems and in jails. This is already in addiction clinics. This is already in research programs. We're dealing with companies. We're working with government bodies. and we're working with a lot of doctors and psychiatrists. This is already in clinics around the world. So we now have a language, we now have an actual framework that when people Google the terms, like when people do Google Kundalini, it could be a school principal or a parent or the CEO of a company, when they study the program, when they Google it, Kundalini, then when they start to see the images first appear, then they see, this woman with her tongue sticking out, and then they see the snake. Is that really something that we would, so I'm not debunking Kundalini. Go ahead and use it because it has power and agency in a spiritual context, but in an educational, pedagogical, medical, psychiatric, political governance context, it won't really sustain itself. So develop other contexts that would allow this to be met, where things are at, so that if we were to speak to concerns regarding vaccination, nutrition, and so on and so forth, to really start to answer these questions, we would need more data. We'd actually need to gather more data. We can't just, and we are starting to gather data. It's just that it's really early right now. If we're going to study vaccination, for example, really it's to scrutinize this in a deconstructive way, which is to do a close reading. We would need to understand the cellular mechanisms, the RNA, the DNA inscriptions happening. And I don't think sound or vibration in the work that we do has been understood yet. There hasn't been that many correlations between the relationship between music and brain states. That is only starting to get studied now. So if you're using these tools, such as music, start to offer like a structural approach. It could take you months or years of really getting to know if you are interested in this as a real therapeutic device and so on and so forth, then that would be interesting. So that's what happens when you bring all these different domains together. You ask like a medical question within a spiritual context. For there to be a meeting between science and spirit, we would really have to slow down our exploration and thinking process. We're super behind, in fact, because this work had already been pressed forward, but we still lack some understandings of what could lead to balance and what actually imbalances people sometimes. But I think because we are understanding things more, then we're learning to bring about a different way of holding this more and more. Maybe one more question, and then we're more or less like. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Hello, I'm Julka. Yeah, I'm asking the question about womb healing, but it was not really clear about the tools. How I can heal my womb as a woman because I have.
Oh, the womb. I
Huh?
see. I see. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I have so much pain doing also Kundalini activation, plant medicine, all the time I'm processing the pain doing my womb, but I don't get to an end, and I want to
Yeah.
know, what can I do for this?
Okay, amazing. All right, let's see if I can bring up the screen again. Thank you. And yeah, sorry about that. It's still good that at least that we talked about the womb from a figurative space, but let's now look at it from a literal space. All right, so let's look at this from, let's say, the chakra perspectives, and then we'll relate that to an endocrine system later on. So the chakra system could relate to the endocrine system in a way that you would have this thing in the middle. Let's not go into that yet. So let's say we bring up the colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and indigo. And in the middle would be violet. The indigo. So these are the endocrine glands. And when you talk about the womb, what regulates womb functions would be endocrinal still. So in the men, it would be the testes, and then in women, it would be the ovaries. In the indigo, it might be the pineal gland. The blue would be the thyroid, and then the green would be the thymus. The yellow would be the adrenal gland. The red could be the pancreas, but we normally, in the process, just look at growth hormones, which should be spread throughout the whole body. Okay, so they all have different functions. So the pineal gland would be the sleep-wake cycle. Thyroid would be metabolism. And the thymus would be more related to the immunity functions of the body. The adrenal would be responsible for energy management. Now, these would be responsible for reproduction. They could still be responsible for energy management and for growth, but they're responsible for reproduction. Reproduction, and let's just say development. All right. So a lot of these would communicate either with each other or with the thing in the middle or the rest of the body through hormones. Okay, like the brain, parts of the brain communicate through neurotransmitters. The adrenal system communicates through hormones. So when you look at the hormones, in the orange, it would be LH, FSH, it would be testosterone, progesterone. Like all of these are used to communicate with the rest of the body. And what is it that we communicate? What are these signals? The signals are quite simple. Now, a lot of this would start in the middle space. It would either be to stimulate or to inhibit? All right. So, yes, too much stimulation will not be good for inhibition. Meaning if you go too high, if your mechanisms are to try to bring things up, then something doesn't go down. So I will have some advice for you after this. So what coordinates that, like this thing in the middle? This is there's basically two glands there. One of them is the hypothalamus, and one of them is the pituitary. A lot of people believe that the pituitary gland is synonymous with the crown chakra, but in a way, the hypothalamus actually sends signals to the pituitary that then sends signals to all of these: the adrenal, the thymus, the thyroid, the pineal, the testes, the ovaries, the pancreas. There are a few others, but those are the major ones. So this is my advice. From the things that you've listed, like Kundalini, psychedelics, a lot of those are stimulatory. What you now need to think about is inhibitory elements. So what I would give you, maybe through Siegfried, is the sleep playlist. I would love for you to try that out. It could be 4 times a week or every day. It's 2 hours. Play it while you're sleeping, and that is helping to slow down some of the activity that might be happening in the hypothalamus. Now, why is this important? The hypothalamus has many, it's very weird. The hypothalamus has regions that are responsible for anxiety or deep fear. Reproduction is also a part. So the hypothalamus is actually, for example, like responsible for oxytocin release or prolactin release. A lot of those would be related to the orange, like here. So when you heal anxiety, you also heal reproduction. There's a lot more regions to the hypothalamus that we could just list down, like a heart rate, sleep-wake cycle, and so on and so forth. But we stick to this. So what you need is not just the stimulation. If you're already trying these out, if too much of that is done, then what happens is you'll get stuck in a loop. You'll just be going around in circles. What breaks the loop is either here, if you conduct more inhibition, what you're needing is a lot more GABA, probably, because when you're overstimulating, you're receiving too much glutamate, which is excitatory in the system. So what you need is to really, really experience a lot of deep delta states, because if you've already been working hard, let's say you've already been stimulating yourself, if you keep stimulating yourself and you're not inhibiting, you're not integrating, you're not resting, you're not digesting, digestion is what breaks the loop. So I just ask you to slow down and to not keep forcing things, and really just to rest. And in that resting period, in that dream state, if you balance all of these, because they're all interconnected, immunity, metabolism, dream, rest, insight, which happens sometimes when you slow things down, development, reproduction, energy management. It's merely balancing these. You want enough of both, right? So now because the examples that you gave would be psychedelics and Kundalini, the sleep playlist is still the same. It still does the, where is that? It still does the simultaneous co-activation, but at the same time, it also holds that in a much more inhibitory fashion. So I would specifically go for that because I'm working a lot with women with womb problems, and I've just been telling them, okay, manage the waves. If you don't have the time, then do it when you do actually have the time, which is when you're dreaming. I have a lot of other advice, but it would take the whole day. So that's the quickest, and would just ask Sigfrid to give you the Rest and Digest playlist. If you could just play that right when you're going to sleep, keep it at moderate volume. Okay, I think that's good. It's exactly 1:07 here. Are you guys still journeying today, Sigrid?
Yes, well, now after we had an inner dance session this morning, where we started shifting from the classical sequential music into the, now we had another one which is a mixed in between, where there was some mixed I produced with my noise and DJ Pro. And then now they're going to do the last exercise, the last activation, half of the group and half of the group. And tomorrow there will be the final day. So there's guests coming. So they have a final session here and then the final celebration.
Yeah, we did
Amazing.
falling sky. Yeah.
Yeah, we did
This morning.
Skyfall this morning.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, just let me know how it goes the rest of the day, and thank you for letting me be here. If there are more questions that are pressing, then just send them. I'm starting a 10-day training tomorrow, mostly for South Americans, but maybe I'm awake sometimes and I can just.
With Christina translating into, actually,
Yeah.
we had also lots of Mexican people who said they would like to come maybe next year in February when we are joining. And also a few people here. Maybe you can spend a few words about the training, about the online training, if you want to share about the possibility of joining for people of this group.
Well, there's an Inner Dance Germany space holder named Ahilan who helps to hold some of the research and study programs. So if they're interested in online work, you can send them the number of Ahilan and he can, host. I would still be doing much of the training, but it needs to be coordinated because this is now becoming like a global study space. And the training is 1 year long, which had already started. So if you join, you'd actually be catching up with the second trimester. But that's okay because I think we're only really starting to ground some of the information now. We had a long intro, so I don't think it's too late. So that could be interesting. But you're also welcome to come visit the Philippines, maybe during your winter or cold months. The island of Palawan is one of the most beautiful islands in the world. So you may as well hit two birds with one stone, go through your study process and have a nice time with Mother Earth here. So you're welcome to come. I see someone.
There's one more.
Just a shortly question. We are in Taiwan, I think. This is nearly the Philippines.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in Southeast Asia, which is our neighbor.
This year in summer, is it possible to visit you this summer too?
We have a summer training in July that we've opened up. So you can write to us if the dates line up. But we're not sure if we open the space so much. You have to write to my partner and Christina. They handle the inflows because sometimes I'm hiding. But there's an opening in July.
Okay, so we can connect
Amazing.
to.
Yes, you can get the numbers from Sigfrid and Sandra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you feel a little bit resfriado. How do you say it in English?
As you have a bit of a cold or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing a Holy Week with my kids and we were in a hotel and the air conditioning was just not so healthy.
Take care.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay, so you guys have a great rest of the day, and thank you so much for bringing me in. I love being here. Yeah, just jumping into Germany, coming from Mexico last week is, oh, actually it was this week, is such a nice travel.
Yeah, it's big shift in terms of time for us. Yeah. So thank you very much, Pai, for
Thank you.
again for your patience and for your time. It's after midnight for you, so
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate. And
Okay,
yeah,
and hope to see some of you soon. Okay, bye. Thank you.
bye. And bye to Italy. Bye.
Yeah, bye.